Now, first of all, we have to remember that what do we mean by factor analysis. So when we talk about factor analysis, it is a general name denoting a class of procedures primarily used for data reduction. Now, when we talk about data reduction, we can say that this factor analysis is a data reduction or data summarization technique. Now, in order to make you understand that what is the purpose of primarily this factor analysis is, let's say those who are in the stage of making the questionnaire or preparing the questionnaires. Now, what happens is that whenever we want to assess either the attitudes or the perception or the behavior of the participants, so in order to measure these attitudes, behaviors, or perceptions, what do we do? In questionnaire, we write many items. Now, those statements, they relate to different aspects. Now, what happens is, let's say, for example, I'm interested in finding out the financial behavior of the participants. Now, when I'm talking about the financial behavior, maybe, or if let's say I want to see that whether the participants, they what is their behavior regarding the financial planning. Now, you might not be very clear with that. Financial planning means that how do I manage my personal finances? I'm talking here about personal financial planning. I want to do some research. I want to see that whether people are aware about that the financial planning is the need of the hour these days. Because as such, if we talk about financial planning, it will include the tax planning, it will also include the loan management, that is the credit management, it will also include the retirement management, it will include the insurances and all. So there are many aspects to it. So what we do is that when we make a questionnaire, then in order to measure a certain concept, we write different statements, and to those statements in the form of questionnaire, we call them as items. Now, what happens is, let's say, if I'm talking about the financial planning behavior of an individual, I have given them 30 statements to fill, in which either they agree or disagree, or they tell me their satisfaction level, whatsoever, how means the way I have designed the Likert scale. Now, what happens is that if I will explain all the 30 items, that for first item, how many people they agreed, how many people they disagreed, and what is their mean. So it would be cumbersome to explain the entire 30 items of the questionnaire, and it will become meaningless, as well as the reader, he will become bored, that he will not be able to understand. So what we do in factor analysis is, with the help of this technique of factor analysis, we reduce the number of items to a manageable number of factors. Let's say there are 30 items in my questionnaire, means there are 30 statements in my questionnaire. If I will not use, now this one thing is very clear, that those 30 statements, they are not different from each other, means few of the statements, they are pointing out to the same kind of dimension. Fine. For example, let's say I want to see that what do people look at while they buy the car. Fine. So there are certain characteristics. We look at the performance, we also look at the after sale service, we also look at that how, what is the aesthetic appeal of the car. This means if I want to find out that what means, for example, mine is a marketing research company, Maruti, they approached me, and they asked me that you find out that what is the preference of the people when they want to buy a car, what factors do they look for. So I've categorized in my mind, or I know that there are many issues which we evaluate before purchasing the car. So for that, let's say I've made a questionnaire in which there are different, but the questions, they are not in a specific order. I'm asking them questions. Now, with the help of factor analysis, what I'll be able to do is, I will, let's say there are 30 statements to whom I'm calling as items. Now, with the help of factor analysis, those 30 statements, they can be grouped into a smaller number of factors. And those factors, let's say, giving you an example, let's say there are 5 factors. right? Which we have extracted with the help of factor analysis. Now this technique in itself, what this technique will do is, this technique will group the items or the statements, the similar kind of items or statements under one factor. Then the second set of similar statements, they will be grouped under second factor. So earlier we had to deal with 30 statements or 30 items, but if the factor analysis has reduced those 30 items or statements to a manageable number of 5 factors. Now, rather than explaining about each of the 30 items, I will be giving the explanation about those 5 factors. Now, my explanation, it will become more meaningful. The reader will also be, means the person who is reading our analysis, he will also be able to comprehend better in this way rather than comprehending the 30 statements individually. So primarily this factor analysis, it is a general name which is given to a class of procedures which is primarily used for data reduction. Data reduction, this does not mean that we wipe out certain kind of data. It is only that if we have measured the responses on many items or many statements, what we'll be doing is the common items or the items or statements of similar nature, they will be grouped into one factor, and then that summated scale of that one factor or the factor score, it can be used in order to interpret the results. That is what the basic idea behind factor analysis is. So in research, there may be large number of variables, most of which are correlated and which must be reduced to manageable level. Relationship among set of many interrelated variables are examined and represented in terms of a few underlying factors. So this was what I was trying to explain you, that when I asked people that what do they look for when they go for buying a personal car, so there are many, means for example, let's say mine preference is that I want a car which looks very good, means I'm more inclined towards the aesthetic appeal. So for me, the design of the car, the color of the car, the aesthetic appeal of the car, it matters the most. Maybe there are few people, those who prefer that they want the value for money. So if they want value for money, what they would be looking at, they would be looking at first of all the initial price of the car. They will be also be looking at that what will be the after you can say that what would be the resale price of the car. They would also be looking at that what is the performance and mileage of the class. Now if you agree with me, I don't know whether you will agree, we know that Maruti is a hot seller in Indian market. But as far as the designing, the looks of the Maruti cars are concerned, they are normal. They are not above average. But then also they are able to make an impact in Indian market because Maruti has a very good mileage. The after sales service means the cost of maintenance of Maruti cars is very low. That is why we prefer, because most of us are middle class people. It is only that the economy has grown over a period of years. We are able to dream of cars, or we are able to buy cars. So, but once we own the car, the question comes whether we'll be able to maintain it, we'll be able to sustain it. So for that is why if you talk about tier 2 cities, you talk about rural areas, there Maruti is a big hit. Why? Because first of all, it is a value for money. It gives superior performance in terms of mileage. It gives you you can say the maintenance cost is very less. This means that there are different kinds. So means if I'm looking for the factors, there are many factors which are pointing towards the value of money concept. There are many items which are pointing towards the aesthetic appeal, means how are the looks. There are many factors which are talking about the after sales service and the service component. So our factor analysis, what it will do is primarily it will group the items of similar nature under one factor. So rather than explaining each of the item individually, I'll be now explaining what that factor indicates. So my explanation, it becomes easier and it becomes more meaningful. That is what the primary purpose of. So we can say that we are able to summarize the data with the help of factor analysis. So in this technique, relationship among set of many interrelated variables are examined and represented in terms of few underlying factors. Factor analysis is used in the following circumstances. First is to identify underlying dimensions or factors that explain the correlations among a set of variables. One thing I want to tell you, that behind the scenes, the entire calculation of this factor analysis is dependent upon the correlation amongst the items, means correlation among a set of variables. भाई फैक्टर एनालिसिस कोई भगवान तो नहीं है जिसको ये पता चल जाए कि कौन सी स्टेटमेंट्स एक दूसरे से मिल रही हैं. तो जो फैक्टर्स हैं मींस द स्टेटमेंट्स which gets combined into a particular factor, those statements are primarily the statements which have a high correlation among themselves. Therefore what we do is that factor analysis identifies underlying dimensions or factors that explains the correlations among a set of variables. Then is to identify a new smaller set of uncorrelated variables to replace the original set of correlated variables in subsequent multivariate analysis. This means there are twofold usage or use of this factor analysis. First usage is, let me give you an example, then the things will be more clear. Let's say there are 30 items. Items means the statements in the questionnaire. Now those 30 statements, with the help of factor analysis, you are able to extract, let's say, this is again a hypothetical example, you are able to reduce those, or you are able to extract 5 factors out of those 30 statements. In order to make it easier, मैं बोलूं in each of the factor there are 6 statements, means there were total 30 statements, and those statements, they out of those 30 statements, let's say 5 factors they are extracted. So in order to make the things very simple, I say that in each factor there are 6 statements. But no, what I'm doing is, let's say in first factor there are 7 statements, then in second factor there are 5 statements, in third factor there are 3 statements, in fourth factor there are 4 statements, so on so forth. So the first purpose is that we have identified the underlying dimensions, and once we have identified those, we are saying that we have extracted the factors. Now another use is that once you have extracted the factors, you can use these factors for further multivariate analysis. Let's say these 30 statements or 30 items, they are to be treated as independent variables. And then there is some dependent variable. According to Smita ma'am, you have done correlation and regression yesterday. So if you talk about linear regression, then linear regression is a technique in which we establish the relationship between independent and dependent variables. मान लेते हैं जो मैं बोल रहा हूं, I'm saying that there are 30 statements or there are 30 items, हम उनको independent factors मान लेते हैं. So if I'll run a regression with 30 independent factors, so will it make sense? No. But if those items are reduced to 5 factors, now I can conveniently run my regression analysis in order to see the effect of independent factors or independent variable on dependent variable. पहले के अगर मैं factor analysis नहीं करता, if I would not have applied this technique of factor analysis, what would have I done? If I want to carry out the regression analysis, then I would be explaining the behavior of dependent variable with the help of 30 independent variables, which would be meaningless to think of. But yes, 5 factors or 4 factors or 6 factors, they are manageable number, they are manageable independent factors. So using that, I will be using, means I can use the data extracted with the help of factor analysis in subsequent multivariate analysis. One thing more, I'm here only talking about exploratory factor analysis. I'm not talking about confirmatory factor analysis. Confirmatory factor analysis, maybe it is dealt with some other other resource person, and that is when we talk about it can be done with the help of structure equation modeling. In SPSS with the help of AMOS. Then we have smart PLS software in order to do confirmatory factor analysis. यहाँ पर हम फैक्टर्स को एक्सप्लोर कर रहे हैं. एक्सप्लोरेटरी मींस वी आर ट्राइंग टू एक्सट्रैक्ट द फैक्टर्स फ्रॉम द लार्ज नंबर ऑफ आइटम्स. I hope up till this point the things are clear with you. ऐसा तो नहीं कि one sided है, किसी को कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा. Please.
No, sir, it's clear now.
Clear है पक्का?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
किसी को कुछ पूछना है तो आप पूछ सकते हैं. Or should I proceed further?
Sir, please proceed.
Because जो दिमाग में कॉन्सेप्ट है कि हम फैक्टर एनालिसिस क्यों करते हैं वो बहुत क्लियर होना चाहिए. नाउ वन थिंग मोर आई वांट टू डिस्कस विद यू. इन इंडिया what culture is being seen amongst the students? Whenever any technique comes, for example, these days SEM is very much in use. Means too much means if you want to publish papers in good journals, you have to apply SEM, means confirmatory factor analysis, in order to make a model. But it is not that every study will warrant that, which means what I want to tell you, when we take this factor analysis, means whenever we take this data analysis workshops, many students, when we, like for example, I have explained, I'm not taking with you, there is one concept which is used extensively in marketing that is known as conjoint analysis. Now conjoint analysis is a wonderful technique in order to see that what are the preferences of the people, and accordingly the marketing effort of the company, it can be targeted with the help of conjoint analysis. अब बच्चे क्या करते हैं, जब वो कोई टेक्निक सीख लेते हैं ना, तो वो चाहते हैं कि भाई मुझे कंजॉइंट एनालिसिस आ गया, अब चाहे मेरी स्टडी उसको, मींस वेदर माय स्टडी वारंट्स दैट यूज ऑफ कंजॉइंट एनालिसिस और नॉट, बट आई विल बी यूजिंग दिस कंजॉइंट एनालिसिस बाय हुक और क्रूक. दिस अप्रोच इज नॉट गुड. दैट इज बिकॉज दोज हु आर बडिंग रिसर्चर्स, दोज हु हैव जस्ट जॉइन्ड दिस रिसर्च फील्ड, दोज हु आर डूइंग, You might have felt कि आपने आज, मान लेते हैं आपको फैक्टर एनालिसिस में, मेरी ये तमन्ना है कि आपको सबको अच्छी तरह से समझ में आ जाए. अब आपको फैक्टर एनालिसिस समझ में आ गया कि ये तो बहुत आसान चीज है. द वे आई विल डू इट, आई एम कॉन्फिडेंट यू विल बी एबल टू मेक द सेंस आउट ऑफ इट, एंड यू विल से कि हाँ बहुत आसान है. बट ऐसा नहीं कि अगर आपने फैक्टर एनालिसिस, इफ यू हैव लर्नड फैक्टर एनालिसिस, देन वेदर योर स्टडी वारंट्स दैट और नॉट, अननेसेसरली यू स्टार्ट डूइंग इट. मींस अगर आपकी स्टडी कहती है, बिकॉज समटाइम्स व्हाट हैपेंस इज, sometimes क्या, in for example, if I'm carrying out research in the field of human resources, most of the time we use the questionnaire which is properly validated, it is tested, and we use those questionnaires which are well established. अब अगर मैं जॉब सेटिस्फेक्शन की बात करता हूं, तो जॉब सेटिस्फेक्शन के फैक्टर्स उन क्वेश्चनेयर में ऑलरेडी डिटरमिन्ड हैं. तो इफ द फैक्टर्स आर ऑलरेडी डिटरमिन्ड इन द क्वेश्चनेयर, देयर इज नो नीड टू कैरी आउट फैक्टर एनालिसिस. Factor analysis will make sense in that kind of questionnaire where you have developed your own questionnaire with the help of different instruments and the questions which are specific to your study. There it will means जब आप कोई स्टैंडर्डाइज क्वेश्चनेयर को यूज कर रहे हो जिसमें फैक्टर्स बने हुए हैं, वहां पर मैंने देखा बहुत सारे स्कॉलर्स क्या करते हैं, बिकॉज दे नो दिस टेक्निक, दे स्टार्ट यूजिंग द फैक्टर एनालिसिस. वहां पर फैक्टर एनालिसिस की कोई जरूरत नहीं है.
सर, आई डू हैव अ क्वेश्चन.
यस
सर, ये जो आपने अभी जो बताया कि द आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ द लाइक द फैक्टर एनालिसिस की कहाँ पे किस तरह का क्वेश्चनेयर होने से मेरे को फैक्टर एनालिसिस में लगा सकता हूँ. So I mean, like, it will be very helpful if you can show us with an example, like showing us on a screen कि इस तरह का questions है. तो ये ऐसे
देखिए कहानी क्या है. Actually, my area of expertise is finance. I'm not from HR. मेरी बात, मैं आपको एक्चुअली जो आप बोल रहे हैं, मेरे पास अभी रेडीमेड कोई क्वेश्चनेयर नहीं है यहाँ पर जो कि मैं आपको दिखा सकूं. व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू टेल यू इज, आपको समझ आ जाएगा जो आपका क्वेश्चन है. मैं समझ गया कि भी सर आपने तो हमें बता दिया. नाउ हाउ आई विल टेक अ डिसीजन दैट वेदर आई विल बी यूजिंग फैक्टर एनालिसिस और नॉट. यही पूछना चाह रहे हो आप?
Absolutely, sir. Yes, sir. That is my question.
So you are muted.
Okay. Subrat,
Yes, sir, absolutely. That was my question, sir.
you are from which field?
Sir, I'm from management.
No, no. Which functional area?
Basically, it is from the hospitality.
Okay. Let's say you want to, for example, means I'll not be able to give you the concrete answer, but I'll be able to make you understand. Let's say we are talking about job satisfaction. Fine. Now I want to do some research on job satisfaction, for which there is some standardized questionnaire available. From the literature review, I came to know that there is one questionnaire or one instrument which is standardized, and many people they have taken, and that is a good you can say scale which has already been developed for job satisfaction. Now let's say there are certain components of job satisfaction, means there are certain factors which makes up the total concept of job satisfaction. तो वो जो factors हैं, अगर उस questionnaire में already defined हैं, तो आपको factor analysis लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है.
Okay. Now I got it. So, sir, यहाँ पे I would like you to give an example कि मैंने जैसे आपने कहा कि उसको 3-4 स्टेटमेंट को अब एक जगह में ग्रुप करके देन उसको एक फैक्टर बना रहे. कैन यू गिव अस एन एग्जांपल? दैट इज व्हाट आई एम आस्किंग.
यस, जब मैं आपको हैंड्स ऑन कराऊंगा आपका ये डाउट बिल्कुल क्लियर हो जाएगा.
ओके सर, थैंक यू सो मच. आई गॉट इट नाउ.
जब हैंड्स ऑन हम करेंगे वहां पर हम फैक्टर भी आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे और उस फैक्टर का नाम भी आप लोग मुझे बताओगे, बिकॉज दैट इज अ सब्जेक्टिव, दैट इज व्हाट माय आर्टिस्ट्री इज, कि भाई ये फैक्टर्स मेरे एक मींस दीस स्टेटमेंट्स दे आर कमिंग ऑन टू और दे आर लोडिंग ऑन टू अ पर्टिकुलर फैक्टर. अब ये स्टेटमेंट्स क्या बता रही हैं तो उसका नाम भी मैंने खुद से इजाद करना है, मैंने खुद से उसका नाम आई हैव टू नेम, आई हैव टू गिव अ नॉमेनक्लेचर टू दैट फैक्टर.
Got it, sir. Got it. Thank you.
Fine. I hope the doubt is clear.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, fine. Now I can proceed further. So factor analysis is used in following circumstances. First is to identify underlying dimensions or factors that explain the correlations among a set of variables. Second is to identify a new smaller set of uncorrelated variables to replace the original set of correlated variables in subsequent multivariate analysis. Fine. So up till this, at least a basic understanding that why do we conduct this factor analysis, it is clear with you all. Now, what are the applications of factor analysis? Now, primarily here, from our point of view, we will be using it for the research purposes. And now, if this research is for some marketing or if this research is for some company, then obviously this factor analysis, it can be used in market segmentation for identifying the underlying variables on which to group the customers. New car buyers might be grouped based on relative emphasis they place on economy, convenience. Spardhan, please mute yourself. New car buyers might be grouped based on relative emphasis they place on economy, convenience, performance, comfort, and luxury. So primarily this factor analysis, it can be used in any functional area. We can use it in HR, we can use it in marketing, we can use it in finance, we can use it in production. Wherever we want to see that what are the underlying dimensions of a certain phenomena, there we can use this concept of factor analysis. In product research, factor analysis can be employed to determine the brand attributes that influence consumer choice. It can also be used in advertising studies, pricing studies. I have taken questions from different areas. So once we'll do that hands-on, you'll be able to understand that where all we can use this factor analysis. Now, there are certain terms which are associated with this concept of factor analysis, and we must have a basic knowledge. Obviously, if I will tell you these terms in one go, you may or may not be able to understand each one of them. But I assure you, once we will do hands-on, you will be clear, you will be for sure, you will be clear that how do we conduct this factor analysis. Now, what happens is, it is not, first of all, like Subrat has put the question that how do we come to know that whether factor analysis is to be done or not. So I gave him that if you are using the standardized questionnaire in which already the factors are specified, you need not carry on the factor analysis. But if you have developed the questionnaire of your own and you are measuring different dimensions, then it makes sense to use this factor analysis. But it is not that on any data set, the factor analysis, it can be applied. There are certain conditions which must be fulfilled so that it determines the suitability of factor analysis. वैसे तो क्या है, मेरे पास डेटा है, मैं SPSS में कमांड डालूंगा तो फैक्टर एनालिसिस की कुछ ना कुछ आउटपुट आ जाएगी, I will get the output. But there are certain prerequisites which have to be tested before proceeding with this concept of factor analysis, out of which there are two things which are very, very important. The first one is the Bartlett's test of sphericity. Now, this Bartlett's test of sphericity is used to test the hypothesis that the variables are uncorrelated in the population. Don't get confused. अगर समझ आता है तो बहुत अच्छी बात है, अगर नहीं समझ आता तो मैं आपको स्टैटिस्टिक्स के हिसाब से जब आउटपुट आएगी तो बता दूंगा कि बार्लेट्स टेस्ट का क्या रिजल्ट. देखिए, in case of Bartlett's test of sphericity, we make null hypothesis that there is no correlation amongst the variables. So my alternative hypothesis becomes that there is a correlation in the population, means that the variables, they are correlated. So our Bartlett's test of sphericity, it must advocate our alternative hypothesis, which means that according to Bartlett's test of sphericity, our p-value, it must be less than 0.05. Means we must say that our Bartlett's test of sphericity is significant. So if our Bartlett's test of sphericity is significant, that will indicate that my variables are correlated. If my variables are correlated in the study, in the population, then only I can proceed with the process of factor analysis. So factor analysis करने से पहले मुझे Bartlett's test of sphericity का significance check करना है. And if I find that if my Bartlett's test of sphericity is significant, then only I can proceed ahead with the concept of factor analysis. How do we do it? वो मैं अभी बताऊंगा कि Bartlett's test of sphericity. Simple सा समझना, मैंने आपको अभी पहले भी बताया कि जो फैक्टर एनालिसिस है, इसका जो सारा का सारा कॉन्सेप्ट है वो किस पे बेस करता है, दैट वेदर देयर इज अ कोरिलेशन बिटवीन द वेरिएबल्स और नॉट. अगर वेरिएबल्स कोरिलेटेड ही नहीं है, वो एक दूसरे से मैच ही नहीं करते, तो क्या वेदर डू यू थिंक दैट दे कैन बी क्लब्ड अंडर वन फैक्टर? नो, इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल टू क्लब देम अंडर वन फैक्टर. सो द रिक्वायरमेंट फॉर एनी फैक्टर एनालिसिस टू बी फ्रूटफुल इज दैट द वेरिएबल्स दे मस्ट बी कोरिलेटेड. फ्यू ऑफ द वेरिएबल्स दे मस्ट बी कोरिलेटेड. ऐसे नहीं कि सारे एक दूसरे से कोरिलेटेड हुए तब तो फैक्टर बनेंगे ही नहीं. तो मींस there are few variables which are highly correlated and not correlated with others, but those other variables, they are correlated. So that Bartlett's test of sphericity, it tells me about the correlation amongst the variables. So I have to see that my Bartlett's test of sphericity, it becomes significant. Then there is now, first is for checking that whether we can proceed with factor analysis or not, first is the Bartlett's test of sphericity. Then correlation matrix, इसका सिर्फ मतलब समझना है, इसकी कोई कंडीशन नहीं है. A correlation matrix is a lower triangle matrix showing the simple correlation between all possible pairs of variables included in the analysis, and the diagonal elements are all 1. Obviously, correlation of one factor with that very factor, it will be 1. So correlation matrix से सिर्फ हमें ये पता चलता है, if there is a high correlation, we can say that there is a suitability of factor analysis. But primarily we use two factors. First is the Bartlett's test of sphericity, and the second one is this KMO measure of sampling adequacy. ये भी मैं अभी बताऊंगा आपको. Then another term which is associated with this factor analysis is the term communality. Amount of variance a variable shares with all other variables, this is the proportion of variance explained by common factors. So the variables which are under a particular factor, how much is a variance that amongst those variables, that is what my commonality is. कहाँ use होगा ये बाद में बताएंगे जब output आएगी. Then comes the concept of eigenvalue. Eigenvalue, it represents the total variance explained by each factor. Eigenvalue concept is used in order to extract the number of factors. अब आप confuse मत होना कि सर नई से नई चीज बोल रहे हैं. Extract the number of factors means sometimes we face dilemma that how much are the appropriate number of factors which must be extracted. So in order to see that how many are the appropriate number of factors which must be extracted, there we use this concept of eigenvalue. Once we'll get the output, I'll explain you that what is the purpose of this eigenvalue. Then comes factor loadings. Correlations between the variables and the factors is what factor loadings is. Will also be clear with the help of the output. Factor matrix. A factor matrix contains the factor loadings of all the variables on all the factors. ये भी समझ में आ जाएगा output के साथ. Then factor scores, they are composite scores estimated for each respondent on the derived factors. I've told you that once we are able to extract the factors, we can use these factors for subsequent analysis. So for that subsequent analysis, these factor scores, they can be used, and these factor scores we can give in SPSS, we can give the command that whether the factor scores they have to be derived or not. If we want to go in for further analysis, we compute these factor scores. Then comes the Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin measure of sampling adequacy. There are two preconditions that whether we can proceed with this concept of factor analysis or not. First one is the Bartlett's test of scarcity. The second one is the KMO measure of sampling adequacy. It is also this KMO measure of sampling adequacy is used to examine the appropriateness of factor analysis. High values between 0.5 to 1 indicate appropriateness. Values below 0.5 imply not. This means that before proceeding with the concept of factor analysis, we have to check Bartlett's test of scarcity. It must be significant. We have to see the value of KMO measure of sampling adequacy. It must be greater than 0.5. If these two factors means Bartlett's test of scarcity is significant and KMO measure of sampling adequacy is more than 0.5, then only we will proceed with the procedure of factor analysis. Otherwise, our data, it is not suitable for the process of factor analysis. Then comes percentage of variance, the percentage of total variance attributed to each factor. ये भी मैं output में बताऊंगा आपको. And then there is a scree plot. A scree plot is a plot of the eigenvalues against the number of factors in order of extraction. This will also be clear when we will do the output. So please don't make this assumption in your mind that many things they have not been discussed, because these are, I have already shared this PPT, means these are the important terms in factor analysis. You must know about all these terms. I've explained you few of them will be explained once we'll start doing the hands-on exercise. Now up till this